The crimson sand of the Korathian arena burned beneath my boots as I stood before the most intimidating sight I'd ever encountered in my 3 years as a diplomatic attaché. Queen Zara'thess of the Valkyrian Empire towered 8 feet tall, her obsidian skin gleaming with ritual combat oils that highlighted every perfectly sculpted muscle. Her forearms flexed with casual menace, each hand capable of crushing steel, while her luminous golden eyes regarded me with the kind of predatory amusement a cat might show a wounded mouse. So her voice resonated through the packed amphitheater. Like rolling thunder, the humans send me a diplomat instead of a warrior. The crowd of assembled alien dignitaries murmured their approval, their various forms of laughter creating a cacophony that made my teeth ache. How delightfully ... insulting. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I adjusted my dress uniform, acutely aware of how inadequate it looked compared to her ceremonial battle armor. The gleaming black metal seemed to flow like liquid shadow across her impressive frame, leaving strategic areas exposed in the traditional Valkyrian style that emphasized both beauty and lethality. Her silver hair cascaded in intricate braids, adorned with the skulls of previous challengers, a fashion choice that really drove home the seriousness of my situation. "Your Majesty," I began, my diplomatic training kicking in despite the various real possibility of imminent death. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, representing the Terran Federation." "I'm here too. I know why you're here, little human." She descended the steps of her throne with fluid grace that made my heart skip several beats, whether from terror or an entirely inappropriate attraction to the deadliest woman in 3-star systems, I couldn't say. "You've come to negotiate passage through our space for your precious trade routes. But you see, I have a problem with your species." The arena fell silent except for the whisper of wind across the sand. I could feel thousands of eyes upon me, waiting to see how humanity's representative would handle this moment. No pressure at all. "What kind of problem, Your Majesty?" Her laugh was like music wrapped in razor wire. "Your people are ... soft. Weak. You solve conflicts with words instead of strength, with compromise instead of conquest. How can I trust such creatures with access to our territory?" She began circling me, her movements hypnotic and predatory. Each step brought her closer, and I caught hints of her scent, something like lightning and exotic flowers, with undertones of danger that made my pulse race. "Therefore," she continued, "I propose a test. You will face me in combat. If you prove yourself worthy, your people may have their trade routes. If not..." She shrugged, the gesture somehow making her armor shift in ways that were definitely not helping my concentration. "Well, let's just say the negotiations will be concluded rather permanently." The crowd erupted in approval, their various sounds of excitement creating a wall of noise that pressed against my eardrums. I looked around the arena, taking in the sea of alien faces, all eager to watch a human get thoroughly dismantled by their warrior queen. "My PETA," I repeated slowly, my mind racing through every possible diplomatic solution. "Your Majesty, surely there must be some other way too. Are you refusing my challenge?" Her voice dropped to a purr that somehow managed to be both seductive and terrifying. How disappointing. I had hoped humans possessed at least some vestige of honor. The insult to my species stung more than the personal slight. I'd spent years studying alien cultures, learning their customs, their values, their forms of honor. The Valkyrians respected strength above all else, but they also had a complex code that governed their warrior society. Refusing a formal challenge would not only end the negotiations, it would mark humanity as cowardly in the eyes of every species present. "I accept," I heard myself say, the words tumbling out before my survival instincts could stop them. "Queen." Zara'thess smiled, revealing teeth that were definitely sharper than strictly necessary. "Excellent. Combat will take place in 1 hour, giving you time to ... prepare yourself." Her golden eyes raked over my form with obvious amusement. "Though I fear no amount of preparation will help you, little diplomat." As she turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something unexpected in her expression, a flash of what might have been disappointment, as if she'd hoped for something more than the foregone conclusion everyone expected. An hour later, I stood in the center of the arena wearing the closest thing to combat gear I could scrounge up, a tactical vest over my uniform. Standard issue, boots, and a ceremonial sword that felt about as useful as a butter knife against a tank. The weapon was more for show than function. Valkyrian honor. Combat traditionally used personal weapons only. My sidearm definitely didn't qualify. Queen. Zara'thess emerged from the opposite entrance, and the sight of her in full battle regalia nearly made me forget how to breathe. She'd traded her ceremonial armor for something that looked like it had been forged from starlight and shadow, covered even less than before, highlighting her warrior's physique while providing maximum mobility. Her forearms now carried an array of weapons that would have made a museum curator weep, energy blades that hummed with barely contained power, and what looked like a war spear that could probably punch through a starship's hull. "Any last words, human?" she called out, her voice carrying easily across the arena. I tested the weight of my sword, knowing it was hopeless, but determined to at least die with dignity. "Just one question, Your Majesty. What exactly constitutes victory in this combat?" Laugh rang out like a bell. "Victory is achieved when your opponent can no longer continue fighting. Death is not required, but ... double quotes." She shrugged eloquently. Accidents happen. The crowd's bloodthirsty roar was deafening. I looked up at the assembled aliens, seeing representatives from dozens of species, all here to witness what they expected to be humanity's humiliation. The weight of not just my own life, but the future of human expansion into this sector settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. A ceremonial gong echoed across the arena, its deep tones signaling the beginning of combat. Queen Zara'thess began her approach, moving with the fluid grace of a natural predator. Her weapons weaved through the air in complex patterns, each movement designed to showcase her skill while building up to the inevitable strike. I raised my sword in a defensive posture, my diplomatic training warring with 3 years of mandatory military service. The queen was faster than anything human-sized had a right to be. Her first attack came from 2 directions simultaneously, upper arms wielding energy blades while her lower arms thrust with the spear. I managed to parry one blade, the impact sending shockwaves up my arms, but the spear point stopped just inches from my chest. She could have ended it right there. "Too slow," she purred, spinning away in a display of acrobatics that would have made Olympic gymnasts weep with envy. "Your reflexes are adequate for a human, I suppose, but hardly impressive." She was toying with me. The realization should have been humiliating, but instead it sparked something else: curiosity. Why wasn't she pressing her obvious advantage? In my studies of Valkyrian combat, I'd learned they valued efficiency above showmanship. Yet here she was, drawing out a fight she could end in seconds. Her next assault was a whirlwind of steel and energy. I gave ground, my sword work becoming increasingly desperate as I tried to keep up with forearms moving in perfect coordination. She was magnificent, deadly and beautiful in equal measure. Her movements a lethal dance that combined artistry with overwhelming violence. But as the combat continued, I began to notice something. For all her skill and power, Queen Zara'thess was holding back. Not just in terms of lethality. She was genuinely pulling her punches, keeping the combat at a level where I could at least pretend to participate. Why? The answer came to me as I barely avoided a spear thrust that would have taken my head off. She was bored. This wasn't a test of my worthiness. It was a formality, a show for the crowd. She'd already decided humans were unworthy, and this combat was just her way of making it official. That thought sparked something in me. A stubborn streak that had gotten me into trouble throughout my diplomatic career. If she wanted a show, I'd give her one she'd never forget. The next time she closed for an attack, instead of trying to match her weapon work, I did something completely unexpected. I dropped my sword and dove inside her guard, wrapping my arms around her waist in what would have been a wrestling move if she hadn't been twice my size and 4 times my strength. "What are you?" she began. But her words turned into something between a gasp and a laugh as my fingers found the exposed skin at her ribs, I discovered during my cultural research that Valkyrians, despite their fearsome reputation, had one weakness that was common to many humanoid species. They were ticklish. Extremely ticklish, as it turned out. Queen Zara'thess, S4 arms, which had been poised to end my life, suddenly went rigid as uncontrollable laughter burst from her lips. The sound was nothing like her earlier predatory chuckles. This was pure, helpless mirth that echoed through the stunned arena. "Stop!" She gasped between peals of laughter, but I was committed now. My fingers danced across her sides, finding every sensitive spot with the precision of a diplomat who'd spent years learning to read people. This isn't the crowd had gone dead silent. I could practically feel their shock radiating through the arena as their invincible warrior queen writhed in my arms, helpless against an attack no one had ever thought to use against her. "Human," she managed to wheeze, her golden eyes wide with a mixture of outrage and something that might have been delight. "This is not proper combat." "You said victory was achieved when your opponent could no longer continue fighting," I replied, my hands never pausing in their assault on her incredibly sensitive ribs. "You didn't specify the method?" She tried to bring her weapons to bear, but every time she attempted to focus, my fingers would find a new spot that sent her into fresh convulsions of laughter. Her spear clattered to the sand, followed by one of her energy blades as she lost her grip. "The rules," she gasped.
Don't say anything about tickling being forbidden."
I finished.
I checked.
That wasn't entirely true. I'd skimmed the combat protocols during my hour of preparation, but I'd been more focused on trying to figure out how to avoid getting killed. Still, sometimes diplomatic training involved a certain amount of creative interpretation. Queen Zara'thess made one last desperate attempt to regain control, her remaining weapons raised high. But I'd found the spot just below her lower arms that made her absolutely dissolve into helpless giggles, and her coordination abandoned her entirely. "I yield." She finally managed to gasp out, the formal words of surrender barely audible through her laughter. "I yield, you impossible human." I immediately stepped back, my hands raised in a gesture of peace. The queen collapsed to her knees. In the sand, still giggling uncontrollably as she tried to catch her breath, her hair had come loose from its braids, creating a silver cascade that framed her flushed features. She looked younger, somehow more approachable, as if the laughter had stripped away some of her intimidating royal bearing. The arena remained silent for a long moment, thousands of aliens trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Then, slowly, a single voice began to applaud, then another. Within seconds, the entire amphitheater erupted in thunderous approval. Cheers and alien equivalents of laughter filling the air. Queen Zara'thess looked up at me from her position on the sand, her golden eyes bright with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "You," she said, still breathing heavily, "are not what I expected." "Neither are you, Your Majesty," I replied, offering her my hand to help her up. She stared at my outstretched hand for a moment, then grasped it with one of her own. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me. Her skin was warm, almost feverish, and surprisingly soft despite her warrior's calluses. "Marcus Webb," she said as I helped her to her feet, her voice thoughtful. "That is your name, yes?" "Yes, Your Majesty, Zara." It was as she brushed sand from her armor, the motion causing interesting shifts in the way the metal plates moved across her. "Form. After what just happened, I think we can dispense with the formal titles, at least in private." The crowd was still cheering, but I barely heard them. Something had changed in the arena, some fundamental shift in the dynamic between us that I couldn't quite name. Where before there had been predator and prey, now there was something more complex, a recognition of equals, perhaps, or at least the potential for equality. "So," I said, trying to process what had just happened, "does this mean humanity passes? Your test?" Zara's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face. "Oh, Marcus Webb, this means something far more interesting than a simple pass or fail." She stepped closer, near enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "This means I may have been wrong about humans, and I am rarely wrong about anything." She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying easily across the arena. Behold, the human has proven that strength comes in many forms, that victory can be achieved through unexpected means. The cheering intensified. The Terran Federation has earned the right to negotiate passage through our space. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a surge of professional pride. I'd done it, secured the trade routes that would open up an entire sector of space to human expansion. The diplomatic corps would be pleased, assuming they could overlook the highly unconventional methods I'd used. But as Queen Zara turned back to me, I realized that the political victory was only the beginning. The way she was looking at me, with a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and something that might have been genuine attraction, suggested that the real challenge was just beginning. "Walk with me," she said, her tone making it clear that this was not really a request. "We have much to discuss." As we left the arena together, I caught glimpses of the assembled alien dignitaries. Some looked shocked, others amused, but all seemed to be viewing humanity and me, specifically in a new light. The small human who had brought down the mighty Valkyrian queen through sheer audacity and unconventional tactics. "You realize," Zara said as we walked through the corridors of her palace, "that news of this will spread throughout the galaxy. The warrior queen who was defeated by tickling." She didn't sound angry about it, merely thoughtful. "Will that be a problem for you?" I asked, genuinely concerned. I'd won the immediate victory, but if it cost her standing among her people, the long-term consequences could be severe. Her laugh was warm and genuine. "On the contrary, I think it will be quite refreshing. Do you know how long it's been since someone surprised me? Since anyone dared to think outside the conventional parameters of combat." We paused at a balcony overlooking the sprawling city below. The alien architecture was breathtaking. Spires of crystalline metal that caught and reflected the light of 3 suns, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that had no names in human language. "Your people," she continued, "may be more interesting than I gave them credit for. You certainly are." There was something in her tone that made me look at her more closely. The queen, who had seemed so intimidating in the arena, now appeared almost vulnerable, as if my unexpected victory had shaken something fundamental in her worldview. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, turning to face me fully, "we see. If humans are as fascinating in other areas as they are in combat." Her golden eyes held a warmth that hadn't been there before, and I felt my pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. The implications of her words hung in the air between us as the alien suns set over the Valkyrian capital, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I had come here as a diplomat seeking trade routes, but I was beginning to suspect I might be leaving with something far more valuable and complicated, as Queen Zara led me deeper into her palace. I couldn't shake the feeling that the real adventure was just beginning. The royal palace of Valkyrie was a marvel of engineering that made human architecture look like children's building blocks. As Queen Zara led me through corridors lined with what appeared to be living crystal, I tried to process everything that had happened in the arena. The diplomatic victory should have been the end of it, mission accomplished, trade routes secured. Return to Earth as a hero? That's the way Zara kept glancing at me, suggested this was far from over. "Tell me, Marcus," she said as we entered what could only be described as a throne room designed by someone with a serious appreciation for both intimidation and beauty. "Do all humans possess your particular tactical flexibility?" Her throne dominated the far end of the chamber, carved from a single piece of black stone that seemed to absorb light. But instead of taking her place on it, she gestured to a more intimate seating area near floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. "I'd like to think we're all capable of creative problem-solving when the situation demands it," I replied carefully, settling into what I hoped was the correct chair. "Alien furniture was always a gamble. Creative problem-solving," she repeated, the phrase as if tasting it.
"And is that what you call?"
Making me laugh so hard I couldn't stand. Her tone was amused rather than angry, but I detected something else underneath. Curiosity mixed with what might have been wounded pride. "I call it survival, Your Majesty. You gave me an impossible situation, so I made it possible by changing the rules." Zara, she corrected, pouring what looked like liquid starlight into 2 goblets. And I didn't change the rules. You found a loophole I never knew existed. The drink she offered me glowed faintly, casting ethereal patterns across the crystal. Table between us, I took a cautious sip and nearly gasped. It tasted like lightning and honey, with an alcoholic content that would probably strip paint. This is going to sound strange, I said after my respiratory system recovered, but I get the impression that you're not entirely displeased with how things turned out. Zar's laugh was nothing like the helpless giggling from the arena. This was rich and warm, with undertones that made my stomach do interesting things. You're more perceptive than I expected. Most beings are so focused on avoiding my weapons they never notice anything else. She rose from her chair with fluid grace, moving to the massive windows. The 3 suns of the Valkyrian system were setting, in sequence, each casting the city in different hues as they disappeared behind the mountains. Do you know how long it's been since someone challenged my assumptions about combat? About strength? She didn't turn around, but I could see her reflection in the crystal glass. Decades, Marcus. I've been so focused on proving Valkyrian superiority through traditional means that I forgot there might be other forms of strength worth considering. And now I'm wondering what other assumptions I might be wrong about. She turned back to face me, and the expression in her golden eyes made my heart rate spike, particularly regarding humans. Before I could respond, a musical chime echoed through the chamber. Zar's expression immediately shifted to something more guarded. The council requests an immediate audience, she said, reading something from a holographic display that had materialized beside her throne. It seems our little demonstration has caused quite a stir. The Valkyrian High Council turned out to be exactly as intimidating as I'd expected. 12 of the largest, most battle-scarred warriors I'd ever seen, each representing a different clan within the Empire. They stood in a semicircle around us. As we entered the council chamber, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. My queen, the center figure spoke, his voice like grinding stone. We must discuss this. Regularity in the sacred combat protocols. General Corvin. Zara informed me through a subtle gesture. Her expression had returned to the regal mask she'd worn in the arena, but I caught the slight tension in her shoulders. Speak plainly, Corvin, she commanded, taking her place at the head of the council circle. What troubles you about the humans? Victory? Another council member stepped forward, her forearms spread in a gesture of disbelief. My queen, what we witnessed was not combatly, was ... entertainment. Commander Yara raises an important point, Corvin continued. The human did not defeat you through strength, skill, or courage. He exploited a weakness that has no place in honorable combat. I felt my temper flare at the implicit insult, but diplomatic training kicked in before I could say something stupid. Instead, I studied the council members, noting their body language, their positioning relative to Zara, the subtle power dynamics at play. With respect, General, I said carefully, Queen Zara established the parameters of victory. She said combat ended when one's opponent could no longer continue fighting. I simply found an effective way to achieve that goal. Through trickery, Yara spat, through taking advantage of our queens. Biology. Adaptation, I corrected. Your combat doctrine is impressive, but it's also predictable. You've become so focused on traditional strength that you've forgotten there are other forms of power. The chamber erupted in angry mutters, but I pressed on. I studied your culture before coming here. Your greatest heroes weren't just strong, they were clever. They found ways to turn disadvantage into victory through wit and courage. How is what I did any different? Because a third council member stepped forward, his scarred face twisted with disdain. You made our queen look weak, made us all look weak. Actually, Zara's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He made us look inflexible. The council fell silent, all eyes turning to their queen. She stood with perfect poise, but I could sense the coiled energy beneath her calm exterior. Lord Thane speaks of appearance, she continued, her golden eye sweeping across each council member in turn. But what did the assembled ambassadors actually see? They saw a human faced with impossible odds find a way to victory. They saw innovation, triumph over tradition. They saw someone who refused to accept that the game couldn't be won. My Queen Corvin began, but she held up a hand for silence. More importantly, they saw that Valkyrians are capable of being surprised, of being challenged in ways we never expected. Do you know what that means for our reputation? The council members exchanged glances, clearly uncertain where their queen was heading with this line of reasoning. It means, Zara continued, beginning to pace in the center of the circle, other species will think twice before assuming they understand our capabilities. It means potential enemies will have to consider possibilities they never imagined. Marcus didn't make us look weak. He made us look unpredictable. I had to admire her political maneuvering. She was reframing the entire incident from a humiliating defeat into a strategic advantage. But I also sensed there was more to it than mere politics. Furthermore, she said, stopping directly in front of me, the human showed remarkable courage. He faced certain death and found a way to turn it into victory. That kind of thinking could be valuable to our empire. You suggest we ally ourselves? With humans, based on one man's parlor trick? Yara's voice dripped with contempt. I suggest we consider that maybe our assumptions about human weakness were premature, Zara replied coolly. Then her expression shifted, becoming something more dangerous. Unless, of course, you'd like to test your own assumptions against Lieutenant Commander Webb. The challenge hung in the air like a loaded weapon. I could see the council members weighing their options, caught between their desire to put me in my place and the very real possibility that I might have more surprises in store. That won't be necessary, Corvin said finally. But the question remains, what do we do about the trade negotiations? The human has technically won the right to discuss terms, but you're concerned about setting precedent, I finished. About other species thinking they can achieve through trickery what they couldn't accomplish through strength. Exactly. Looked at Zara, trying to read her expression. She gave me the slightest nod, encouraging me to continue. Then let me propose something, I said, addressing the full council. Don't just give us the trade routes. Make us earn them properly. The council members looked confused, but I could see understanding beginning to dawn in Zara's eyes. Set up a series of challenges, I continued. Not just combat, but tests of intelligence, creativity, diplomatic skill, all the qualities that make for good allies. Let human representatives prove themselves in multiple areas, and if they fail, Thane asked, then they fail. No trade routes, no alliance, no further negotiations. I met each council member's gaze in turn. But if they succeed, you'll know beyond doubt that humanity has something valuable to offer the Valkyrian Empire. The proposal sparked immediate debate among the council members. Some saw it as an elegant solution to their precedent problem, while others viewed it as an unnecessary complication. But I noticed that Zara was smiling, not the predatory grin from the arena, but something warmer and more appreciative. The human shows wisdom, she said finally, cutting through the discussion. We will consider his proposal. But first, he will be our guest for 3 days while we deliberate. My Queen Corvin protested. Is it wise to learn more about our potential allies? To study their capabilities firsthand? Zara's tone brooked no argument. Yes, General, I believe. It is exactly that wise. As the council dispersed, Zara approached me with that fluid grace that seemed to be her natural mode of movement. Cleverly done, she said quietly. You've given them a face-saving way to proceed, while ensuring humans get a fair chance to prove themselves. And bought myself 3 days to figure out what the hell happens next, I admitted. Her laugh was warm against my ear as she leaned closer. Oh, Marcus, I think you'll find the next 3 days quite ... educational. Later that evening, I found myself in guest quarters that were more luxurious than most 5-star hotels on Earth. The suite overlooked the palace gardens, where alien flowers bloomed in colors that didn't have names in any human language. But, despite the surroundings, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being studied not just by Zara, but by the entire palace staff. A soft chime announced a visitor. I opened the door to find Zara, now dressed in what I assumed was casual wear for a warrior queen. The outfit was still unmistakably martial in design, but it emphasized curves rather than armor plating. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," she said, stepping past me into the suite. "But I realized we never finished our conversation from earlier. The one about questioning assumptions, among other things." She moved to the window, gazing out at the garden. "Tell me, what do you think of my people so far?" Considered the question carefully. Diplomacy required honesty tempered with tact. But something about Zara made me want to be more direct than usual. "I think you're all incredibly impressive," I said finally. "Powerful, skilled, proud, but also maybe a little trapped by your own success." She turned to face me, eyebrow raised. "Elaborate." "You've been the dominant military power in this sector for so long that you've forgotten how to adapt. Your combat techniques are flawless because they haven't needed to evolve. Your strategies are perfect because they've never been seriously challenged. And humans represent that challenge? Not exactly. But we represent something different, a species that's had to adapt constantly just to survive. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, so we've had to become creative." Zara nodded slowly, processing my words. "And you believe this adaptability has value?" "I believe it's what allowed me to defeat you in combat today." Her smile was brilliant. "You did not defeat me, Marcus. You surprised me. There's a difference." Before I could ask what she meant by that, she had closed the distance between us with that impossibly fluid movement. I found myself looking up into golden eyes that held depths I was only beginning to understand. "Would you like to know what else surprised me today?" she asked, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. "What's that?" "How much I enjoyed losing." The admission hung in the air between us, loaded with implications that made my pulse race. I was acutely aware of her proximity, of the heat radiating from her skin, of the way her breathing had subtly changed. "Zara," I began, but she pressed a finger to my lips. "Tomorrow we deal with politics and councils and the weight of two civilizations," she said. "Tonight I'd like to explore other possibilities." Her hand slid from my lips to rest against my chest, and I could feel my heart hammering against her palm. The diplomat in me knew this was complicated, potentially dangerous, a situation that could compromise everything I'd worked to achieve. The man in me didn't care. "What kind of possibilities?" I asked, my voice rougher than I'd intended. Instead of answering with words, she leaned down until her lips were almost touching mine. "The kind that involve finding out whether humans are as creative in other areas as they are in combat." The kiss that followed was nothing like the polite, diplomatic interactions I was used to. It was fierce and passionate, a claiming that left no doubt about her intentions. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard and fairly certain. My diplomatic training hadn't covered this particular scenario. "Still think I'm trapped by my own success?" she murmured against my ear. I managed, that I may have seriously underestimated Valkyrian adaptability. Her laugh was rich with promise. "Oh, Marcus, you have no idea." As she led me toward the suite's bedroom, I realized that the diplomatic mission had just become infinitely more complicated. But looking into Zara's golden eyes, seeing the hunger and curiosity and genuine warmth there, I found I didn't care about complications. Some opportunities were worth the risk. I woke to the sound of alien birds singing outside the palace windows, their melodic calls filtering through the crystal panes as three suns painted the sky in brilliant shades of amber and rose. For a moment, I lay still, processing the events of the past day, the combat, the victory, the council meeting, and then, I turned my head to find Zara watching me, her golden eyes bright with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. She was propped up on one elbow, her silver hair cascading over her shoulder like liquid starlight in the soft morning light. Without her armor and weapons, she looked younger, more vulnerable, though no less magnificent. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying that musical accent that made even simple words sound like poetry. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," I admitted, acutely aware that everything had changed between us. The warrior queen who had terrified me in the arena was now, what exactly, ally? Lover, something more complicated than either term could capture. A soft chime interrupted my thoughts, and urgent. Priority communication according to the holographic display that materialized beside the bed. Zara's expression immediately shifted to something more guarded as she read the message. "What is it?" I asked, sitting up and trying to read her face. "The council has reached a decision regarding your proposal," she said, but her tone suggested it wasn't entirely good news. "They want to implement the trials immediately, starting today." Faster than expected. Yes. She rose from the bed with fluid grace, beginning to gather her scattered clothing. And there's more. Word of yesterday's events has spread beyond our borders, receiving communications from dozens of species wanting to know if the reports are true, if a human really defeated the Valkyrian queen through unconventional means. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. How are they reacting? Mixed responses. Some are curious. Others are skeptical. Few are openly challenging us to prove that Valkyrians are still the dominant military power in this sector. Her expression darkened. The Drachnary hegemony is particularly vocal in their ... amusement. The Drachnary humanity's first contact with them had nearly ended in war before the Valkyrians had intervened. They were known for their aggressive expansionism and complete lack of diplomatic subtlety. They see this as an opportunity, I realized. Test our resolve? Yes. Zara finished dressing, transforming back into the regal figure who commanded an empire.
Yes.
Which is why the council wants to expedite your trials. We need to demonstrate that yesterday wasn't a fluke, that humans can be valuable allies rather than a source of weakness. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. There's something else. The council has decided that I will personally oversee your trials. Is that normal? Nothing about this situation is normal, Marcus. She turned back to me, and I saw concern in her golden eyes. They're testing you, yes. But they're also testing me. My judgment. My ability to distinguish between genuine strength and clever parlor tricks. I understood the implications immediately. If I have failed these trials, it wouldn't just end humanity's chances for alliance, it could undermine Zara's position with her own people. Then I'd better not fail, I said, trying to project more confidence than I felt. Her smile was brilliant but tinged with worry. No pressure at all. An hour later, I stood in a different arena, this one smaller and more intimate. Designed for skill demonstrations rather than mass entertainment. The Valkyrian High Council occupied a raised platform, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. But my attention was focused on the 3 stations arranged across the arena floor, each representing a different challenge. The trials consist of 3 tests, General Corvan announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Intelligence, adaptability, and leadership. The human must achieve a satisfactory performance in all 3 to earn consideration for alliance. What constitutes satisfactory, I asked. That, Commander, Yara said with what might have been a smile, is for us to decide. The first challenge was a tactical simulation, a holographic battlefield, where I had to command mixed human and Valkyrian forces against a Drachnary invasion fleet. The catch was that the simulation was designed around Valkyrian combat doctrine, emphasizing direct assault and overwhelming force. As I studied the tactical display, noting force compositions and terrain features, I became aware of something interesting. The scenario wasn't just testing my strategic thinking, it was testing whether one could adapt human flexibility to Valkyrian strengths. Standard doctrine would be to meet them head-on, I murmured, manipulating the holographic controls. Valkyrian superiority in direct combat to overwhelm their flanks. And that approach fails, Zara said quietly from beside me. The simulation has been run dozens of times with traditional tactics. I glanced at her, noting the slight tension in her posture. She wasn't just observing. She was invested in my success in a way that went beyond political necessity. Let's try something different. Instead of massing forces for a direct assault, I split the fleet into multiple smaller groups. The Valkyrian ships, with their superior firepower, became mobile artillery platforms, while the smaller human vessels used their maneuverability to harass and confuse the enemy formation. Unorthodox, Lord Thane commented. Dividing forces in the face of superior numbers, violates every principle of sound tactics, unless you're trying to make the enemy think they're facing multiple separate fleets, I replied, guiding the simulation forward. The Drachnary force, designed to counter traditional Valkyrian tactics, began making mistakes as they tried to respond to threats from unexpected directions. The battle unfolded like a deadly dance, human speed and adaptability complementing Valkyrian power and resilience. When it was over, the Drachnary fleet was scattered and defeated. Having never been able to bring their full strength to bear against any single target, interesting, Corvin admitted grudgingly. Highly irregular, but effective. The second challenge was more abstract, a problem-solving exercise that required me to navigate a series of increasingly complex logic puzzles while under physical stress. The twist was that the puzzles were designed around Valkyrian mathematical concepts that didn't translate well to human thinking. The key, Zara whispered as I struggled with the third puzzle, is to stop thinking like a human. That's easier said than done, I muttered, sweat beading on my forehead as the exercise machine increased the physical resistance. No, she said, moving closer. Think like us. Like someone who sees strength and beauty as the same thing, who values honor above efficiency. I looked at the puzzle from that perspective, and suddenly the solution became clear. It wasn't about finding the most logical path, it was about finding the most elegant one. The Valkyrian mind, I realized, sought harmony between form and function in ways that human pragmatism often missed. One by one, the puzzles yielded to this new approach. When I finished, even Commander Yara looked grudgingly impressed. "To down," I said, breathing heavily from the physical exertion. "The hardest one remains," Zara warned. The final challenge was leadership, but not in any way I'd expected. Instead of commanding troops or managing resources, I was presented with a mock diplomatic crisis. A border dispute between two Valkyrian clans that had escalated to the edge of violence. "The clan leaders are on their way," Corvin explained. "You have 1 hour to study the situation, then you must mediate their dispute. Success means preventing bloodshed. Failure, ... means two honored clans tear each other apart," I finished. No pressure. The briefing materials were extensive, detailing generations of grievances over territory, honor, and ancient slights that had been passed down through bloodlines. As I read, I began to understand that this wasn't really about land or resources. It was about respect. It's about recognition, about the deeply ingrained Valkyrian need to be seen as worthy. When the clan leaders arrived, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Warlord Keshtar of the Northern Reaches stood 7 feet tall, his scarred frame radiating barely contained violence. Across from him, Lady Vexani of the Southern Peaks was smaller but no less dangerous, her eyes burning. With generations of inherited fury, humans, Keshtar spat when he saw me. "The council sends children to mediate the disputes of warriors." "Perhaps," I said carefully, "they sent someone who isn't invested in either side's version of history." "History is not negotiable," Vexani declared. "The northern dogs invaded our sacred grounds. They must withdraw or face the consequences." "Sacred grounds that were ours by right of conquest 3 centuries ago," Keshtar retorted. "Before your ancestors stole them through treachery." And there it was, the heart of the matter. Both clans believed they had the rightful claim. Both had legitimate grievances, and both were too proud to back down without losing face. "You're both right," I said finally. The statement caused both leaders to fall silent, clearly not expecting that approach. "The Northern Reaches conquered the territory through strength," I continued. "That's the Valkyrian way. But the Southern Peaks reclaimed it through cunning and strategy, which is also the Valkyrian way. You're not fighting over land. You're fighting over which form of Valkyrian virtue is superior." "And what would you have us do?" Vexani asked, her tone dangerously quiet. "Prove it. Both of you." I gestured to the arena beyond the meditation chamber. Single combat between champions. Winner takes the disputed territory. But here's the twist: the combat will be judged not just on victory, but on the honor, skill, and nobility displayed during the fight. "Impossible," Keshtar growled. "How does one judge such things? Having the losing clan acknowledge the Winner's superiority not just in strength, but in the virtues that make a true Valkyrian warrior. I looked between them. The victor gains the territory. The defeated clan gains something potentially more valuable, the recognition that they fought with honor against a worthy opponent. The two leaders exchanged glances, and I could see them turning the proposal over in their minds. It offered both clans a way to save face, while settling the dispute definitively. You would have us trust human judgment of Valkyrian honor. Ixani asked, I would have you trust each other's judgment, I replied. The winner will be decided by combat, but the defeated clan must publicly acknowledge not just the victory, but the honor with which it was achieved. That acknowledgement becomes part of the historical record, ensuring that both clans are remembered for their nobility. After a long moment, Keshtar extended his hand to Vexani. It has been too long since the clans fought for sport rather than spite. I accept these terms. As do I, she replied, grasping his forearm in the traditional Valkyrian gesture of respect. As the clan leaders departed to arrange their champion combat, I turned to find the entire council staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Well, I asked. In 3 hours, General Corvin said slowly. You have achieved what our finest diplomats couldn't accomplish in 3 months of negotiations. You turned their conflict into competition, Commander Yara added, and for the first time her voice held something like approval, very ... human. Lord Thane stepped forward, his scarred face serious. The trials are complete. Human Marcus Webb has demonstrated intelligence, adaptability, and leadership worthy of consideration for alliance. More than worthy, Zara said, moving to stand beside me. He has shown us possibilities we never imagined. Corvin held up a hand. There remains one final matter. The Drachnary response to yesterday's events has escalated. They're demanding proof that Valkyrian strength hasn't been compromised by association with weaker species. What kind of proof? I asked, though I suspected I wasn't going to like the answer. They're sending a war fleet to our borders, Zara replied, her expression grim. Not to invade, but to ... test our resolve. They want to see if we'll back down from a confrontation now that we're considering alliance with humans. And if we do back down, then they'll know we've grown weak, Corvin said bluntly. Every aggressive species in this sector will follow their example. I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. My victory in the arena had achieved more than I'd intended it, had forced the entire political structure of the sector to reevaluate the balance of power. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing, Zara said firmly. This is our responsibility. You've done more than enough. But, no, I said, understanding flooding through me. I started this when I changed the rules in that arena. Now I need to help finish it. I turned to address the full council. The Drachnary are testing whether your association with humans makes you weak, so let's show them the opposite. Let me stand with your fleet when they arrive. Let them see that Valkyrian strength isn't diminished by human alliance. It's enhanced by it. Absolutely not, Commander Yara protested. You're a diplomat, not a warrior. And one human ship against a Drachnary war fleet would be suicide. Pooh. Said anything about fighting them? I grinned, feeling that familiar surge of creative problem-solving that had gotten me into this mess in the first place. I have a better idea. 3 days later, I stood on the bridge of Queen Zara's flagship as the Drachnary war fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valkyrian system. 50 massive vessels designed for intimidation as much as combat, their hulls bristling, with weapons that could level cities. Impressive, Zara murmured from beside me. They're certainly not subtle about their intentions. That's what I'm counting on, I replied, reviewing the plan one final time. It was insane, risky, and violated several fundamental principles of military strategy. In other words, it was perfectly human. The Drachnary fleet arranged itself in classical intimidation formation, a wall of firepower meant to demonstrate overwhelming superiority. Their flagship, a kilometer-long dreadnought called the Fist of Dominion, moved to the front of the formation. Valkyrian vessels came the transmission from the Drachnary commander. I am Admiral Krenok of the Hegemony. We come to verify reports of your ... accommodation with lesser species. Surely the mighty Valkyrians have not fallen so far as to require human assistance. Instead of Zara responding, I stepped forward to the communications console. Admiral Krenek, this is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation. I believe you wanted to meet the human who defeated Queen Zara'thess in combat. The silence that followed was telling. When Krenek finally responded, his voice carried a mixture of disbelief and derision. You are the one who supposedly brought down the Valkyrian queen? Oh, I didn't just defeat her, I said, glancing at Zara with a grin. I made her surrender through tickling. Would you like a demonstration of human combat techniques? A reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Raucous laughter erupted from the Draknari ships, their crews clearly unable to take the threat seriously. But I noticed something else in their formation, overconfidence leading to sloppiness. Ships drifting slightly out of position as their crews relaxed. You jest, Krenek said finally. No species could be so pathetic as to rely on Tickling. As a combat technique, Admiral, I replied, nodding to Zara, you're about to learn why underestimating humans is a mistake. What happened next had been carefully choreographed over the past 3 days. The Valkyrian fleet suddenly burst into motion, but instead of attacking, they began what could only be described as the most elaborate game of tag ever conceived. Ships darted between the Draknari vessels, their superior maneuverability, allowing them to avoid weapons fire while delivering precisely calculated sensor pings to specific points on the enemy hulls. To outside observers, it looked like harmless harassment to the Draknari crews. It felt like being tickled by Starship. The sensor pings were carefully tuned to resonate with Draknari ship frequencies, creating vibrations throughout their hulls that were annoying but completely harmless. Worse, the precision required to target such specific locations demonstrated just how accurate Valkyrian weapons could be when they chose to show restraint. What is the meaning of this? Krenek demanded, as his massive dreadnought was suddenly surrounded by smaller Valkyrian ships, all of them pinging his hull in a coordinated pattern that made the entire vessel hum. It's called tactical flexibility, I replied. See, Admiral, humans have taught the Valkyrians something valuable, that true strength isn't just about how hard you can hit, but about having so many options that your enemies never know what's coming next. The harassment continued for several more minutes, with Valkyrian ships dancing around the increasingly frustrated Draknari fleet. Every time the enemy tried to target them, they were already somewhere else, their movements seemingly random, but actually following patterns designed to showcase their technological superiority. Finally, I gave the signal, and the Valkyrian fleet suddenly pulled back, leaving the Draknari formation surrounded but untouched. Admiral Krenek, I said, your ships are now tagged with harmless sensor markers that will remain active for approximately 1 week. During that time, every military force in this sector will be able to track your exact location. We could have just as easily planted real tracking devices, or targeted your weapon systems, or disabled your engines. But we chose to make a point instead. What point? His voice was dangerously quiet. That Valkyrian strength isn't diminished by human alliance. It's enhanced by new possibilities. You came here to test whether we'd grown weak. Instead, you've discovered we've grown creative. The standoff continued for several tense moments before Admiral Krenek finally responded. Cleverly done, human. But do not mistake restraint for weakness. The hegemony will remember this. So will everyone else, Zara interjected, speaking for the first time since the demonstration began. They'll remember that the Valkyrian Empire and Terran Federation can work together to achieve things neither could accomplish alone. As the Draknari fleet withdrew, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. We'd achieved the impossible, turning a potential military confrontation into a demonstration of alliance strength, Zara said as the last Draknari ship disappeared. Into hyperspace, that was certainly educational. Did it work? Let's look around you. She gestured to the bridge crew, all of whom were grinning with obvious satisfaction. They're not just impressed with human creativity, they're proud to be part of something new. Later, as we stood together on the observation deck watching the stars, Zara turned to face me with that expression that had become so familiar. Part amusement, part admiration, part something deeper. So Ambassador Webb, she said, using the title that had been officially bestowed just hours earlier. What's your next impossible diplomatic miracle? Ambassador? I raised an eyebrow. I thought I was just a lieutenant commander. That was before you revolutionized interspecies relations, she replied, moving closer. The council was quite impressed with your unconventional methods. And what about you? Were you impressed? Her smile was radiant. Marcus, you've shown me that strength comes in forms I never imagined. That victory can be achieved through means I never considered. That sometimes the best way to win is to change the rules entirely. Now, she paused, her golden eyes searching my face. But most importantly, you've shown me that humans and Valkyrians together can accomplish things that neither species could achieve alone. Are we still talking about diplomacy? Among other things, she said, echoing our conversation from that first evening, then more seriously. Marcus, what we've started here, this alliance, this partnership, it's going to change everything. It's not just for our species, but for this entire sector of space. No pressure, I said, borrowing her phrase from earlier. Her laugh was warm and genuine. Oh, there's going to be enormous pressure. Political complications, cultural misunderstandings, probably a dozen more near-miss conflicts before we figure out how to make this work long-term. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather face those challenges with than the human who defeated a warrior queen through tickling. As she leaned in for a kiss that tasted like starlight and possibility, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just a few days. I'd come to Valkyrie as a diplomatic attaché seeking trade routes. I was leaving as an ambassador, with a new alliance between species. A relationship that defied every regulation in the diplomatic handbook and the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories come from being brave enough to rewrite the rules. So I said when we finally broke apart, what happens now? Now, Zara replied, her eyes bright with mischief and promise, we get to invent the future together. One impossible challenge at a time. Looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite so distant, I realized that the greatest adventures often begin with the courage to try something completely unexpected. And if my experience with Queen Zara'thess had taught me anything, it was that humans and Valkyrians together were capable of redefining what was possible. After all, we'd already proven that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make your opponent laugh. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.